conference at https://bit.ly/30gg2jn and by phone at 646-558-8656, webinar ID 939-0651-9845 to hear and act on the following items. OR-2021-0016, ordinance text and map amendments to the New Haven zoning ordinance to require and incentivize the inclusion of affordable housing units in market rate development. OR 2021-0018, ordinance text amendments to Chapter 13 of the New Haven Code of Ordinances establishing a vacant building registration program as part of the fire code. Per order, Honorable Charles Decker, Chair. Attest, Honorable Michael Smart, City Clerk. These items are on file and available at the office of the City Clerk, room 202 at 200 Orange Street, New Haven, Connecticut 06510. Since this meeting will be held using solely electronic equipment, participation by a quorum of members at the same physical location is prohibited unless that location is made open to the public. Any member of the public may request in writing a physical location and any electronic equipment necessary to attend the meeting in real time, no later than 24 hours prior to the meeting. Said person shall have the same opportunities to provide comment or otherwise participate in the meeting as would be afforded if the meeting were held in person, with the following exception. Under law, the committee is not required to adjourn or postpone the meeting if any person loses the ability to participate because of an interruption, failure, or degradation of any person's connection to the meeting by electronic equipment. For accommodations to view the meeting, please email publictestimony@newhavenct.gov or call 203-946-6483. For accessibility-related accommodations, please call 203-946-7651 voice or 203-946-8582 TTY-TDD. Public comment/testimony may also be submitted via email to publictestimony@newhavenct.gov before 2:00 p.m. on the day of the meeting. If you wish to present testimony at the meeting, you must register in advance at https://bit.ly/30gg2jn or by calling 203-946-7934 or emailing publictestimony@newhavenct.gov before 2:00 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Public can view the meeting at https://bit.ly/30gg2jn or listen by phone at 646-558-8656, webinar ID 939-0651-9845. The password to listen by phone only is 619-414-1324. That is our notice. Welcome, colleagues. Good evening. I will call the attendance in just a moment and recognize other colleagues who are with us. And then I will indicate how I wish to proceed tonight. But first, the attendance of the Legislation Committee meeting. Decker, Chair, is here. Alder Furlow.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Richard Furlow, Ward 27.
Good evening, Mr. Vice Chair. Alder Ferrara Santana has not yet joined us. I believe she's on her way. Alder Douglas.
Here, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Ward 2.
Welcome, Alder Douglas. Alder Morrison. Not yet with us, but I know her to be on her way as well. Alder Marchand.
Adam Marchand, Ward 25.
Welcome, Alder. And Alder Brackeen. Not yet with us. I guess I should have mentioned I'm Ward 9. I'd also like to recognize colleagues who are not on this committee who are joining us. We have Alder Kimberly Edwards, Alder Salvatore DeCole, Arthur Officer, Alder Eli Sabin, Alder Anna Festa, Alder Abigail Roth, and I see that committee member Alder Rosa Ferrara Santana has now joined us. Alder Ferrara Santana, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Alder Santana, Ward 13, Fairhaven Heights.
Welcome. Let me just check the attendees to make sure I'm not missing any colleagues here. I see Alder Roth is back in the attendees. I recognize Alder Roth still. Colleagues, just as a reminder of the custom of this committee, members of the committee should have your camera on unless, of course, you need to step away for a break. And members who are not on the committee are welcome to stay on the panel, but should keep their cameras off. Very well. Going back to the meeting notice, we have two items before us. One is a continuation of the public hearing that we started last month around the inclusionary zoning ordinance. I know that city staff is going to present us with a clarifying text amendment. And then we have a second item as well from the fire department. And so I would like to take the items in that order. So I will invite the city staff to come present on item 1. I would ask staff to keep the presentation fairly brief, and we don't have to go through all the structure of the item that we went through last month. But given that I know that there's some text amendments that you're proposing, for clarity's sake, if you could present those, that would be great, so that we can get back into the public testimony. And my evergreen reminder that anybody who wishes to speak should give their name and address for the record before they do, for our recording. So I see City Plan Director Woods has joined us and Assistant Corporation Counsel Pinto. Folks, tell me how you're proceeding.
Good evening. My name is Aisha Woods. I reside at 42 Canner Street in New Haven, and I'm the Director of City Plan. I think the substance of the substitute text that we submitted is really around some clarifying details for projects that may have partial approvals at this present time. So it's basically a grandfather clarification. And I will turn it over to Assistant Corp Counsel Michael Pinto to just give a brief outline of the details of that. Otherwise, the substitute text doesn't really change any of the substantial policy points that we presented previously, so we won't go over that again, just the highlighted changes.
Great, thanks.
Michael Pinto, Assistant Corporation Counsel. I reside at 449 Central Avenue. If I may share a screen, I just want to bring up the text, so we can walk through it. There's and then I will also sort of address the because the tax abatement language, which is in the order, but not the zoning text.
Mr. Pinto, do you have the ability to screen share, or are you waiting on that?
I apologize. I was just trying to bring up the actual.
Oh, that's okay.
So yeah, give me 10 seconds here.
No problem. Just wanted to make sure you had the ability.
Yeah, if in the meantime, so we can make sure I do have the ability to screen share.
I am getting the message that screen sharing is disabled. So if we can get some assistance with that.
Pinto has the ability at this time.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like I do. So here we go. Okay, I have the red line available too, but so there were. Let me walk through where the changes came, and the substitute or the red line that shows where the specific changes were made. So the student housing, there was some making sure that we had a clarified definition here, that it's that this is because there's been a fair amount of discussion about sort of co-living arrangements, which we were effectively, when we boiled it down, come to roommate situations, which should not be, which we were not intending to exempt. And then moving to, there were also some numbering changes I realized as we were going through after the city, after the last committee hearing, that there was some adjustments that needed to be made in the section headings or the section numbering. So those have been cleaned up. So here is where the sort of substitute language comes in, these applicable developments. And then, so these are all of the mandatory market-driven inclusionary, all of these subsections here have already been described. And then when we get to when you get to the applicability, so it's all applicable developments, but then we're talking about which ones are exempted. And let me just go back up real quick. So prior approved developments, part of this is we have a number of projects that are in the works and working their way through that have some level of approval already, whether that's a DLDA that spells out what the developer's obligation in relationship to affordable housing contribution is, or they've already gone through some part of the site plan approval, and that is over like on the West River housing that is slated to go in on effectively along Tyler and Legion Avenue, or between Tyler, Legion, and Martin Luther King Boulevard. And so that one, the DLDA has not been signed, but the site plan approval and and in effect the Board of Alders approval has already gone through approving the disposition. Now the actual DLDA spelling out the specifics of the development will be submitted shortly. But these prior approved developments and then prior submitted developments, once we set the effective date, anyone who has some portion of their application in, once you've got an application in, or you have an existing approval under the current regime, is effectively grandfathered in when we get to the exemptions. So the ones that had already previously existed, the projects, New Haven Housing, the Housing Authority, student housing, dormitories, which is already an existing definition in the code, and then the prior approved developments or prior submitted developments. And there's also restricted housing agreements. Some of these have a co-op agreement that are restricted housing, which again is the affordable housing set aside, which have some level or some portion of their approvals, but may have to come back for another agency to approve before they can actually get a final development permit. And then also the PDDs that already, or PDUs that already have affordable housing set asides. And then the final one are the minor site plan, effectively minor adjustments to existing site plans that are granted by city plan staff. These would probably not rise to the level of applicable development anyway, or the changes wouldn't, but the development that was previously approved may well. So that was effectively what we have for, those are the substances of the changes. There's one piece that was added at the end. There was a clarification that the development incentives may be aggregated, despite some other language in the ordinance allows only use of one. But in this case, the development incentives can be aggregated. And I'm happy to clarify anything that, if there's anyone, I'm happy to take any questions to clarify anything on the other piece I will point out is that the order is in the order that we've submitted for approval discusses the parameters of the tax abatement agreements, and those would simply be contracts with the developer that would go through the ordinary 28-12 process, 28-4 process. So the authority to abate those, and I think that the inclusionary zoning, or it's my opinion that the inclusionary zoning already fits in within the 28-4 authority. So once the approval and set aside was brought forth, there would be a separate contract with the developer for the actual tax abatement agreement, incorporating the requirements of 28-4. So that is what,
Right.
just I wanted to clarify, that's why you don't see it in the zoning language, because it's not specifically zoning related text.
Got it. Thank you, Assistant Corporation Counsel Pinto. So I would like to proceed in the following way. I'm going to invite colleagues to ask any questions specifically about what was just laid out to us. Then I would like to proceed to public testimony, and then I will invite colleagues to have another round of questioning about the overall proposal, just because I want to make sure that, again, we're not keeping the public testimony until too late. And before we go to Alder Ferraro-Santana, whose hand I see, I want to recognize we've also been joined by our colleagues, Alder Cupo, Alder Carmen Rodriguez, and Alder Honda Smith are here joining us. Welcome, colleagues. I recognize Alder Ferraro-Santana.
Yes, thank you. The reason why I would like to ask this question is I'm actually directing it to Corporation Counsel Pinto. You said the process of authorities is in 28-4. And what exactly is the process? Because I thought there wasn't a process already established, or they were working on it.
28-4 is the taxation section that permits the Board of Alders to authorize contracts to enter into for tax abatements for low-income housing.
Okay.
And that exists already in the ordinances. I don't, under its current existence, I don't think it needs to be amended to permit once if this is approved, I might look at the order one final time to make sure that there would be language that once a set aside, once the agreement is set up for the what the tax abatement, because the order lays out the specifics of how you get the tax abatement and for how long, and on what and obviously it only applies to the affordable units. I don't think we need to amend anything in 28-4. We'll take one last look at the order to ensure that once the order is passed, that after the approval process for a development that is an applicable development to which the inclusionary zoning applies, that would specifically authorize the mayor to enter into the tax abatement agreement and make that a procedural issue, or the mayor could execute these on behalf of the city, because these would be effectively administrative, that it would be moved into an administrative role, because it's specifically spelled out as to who gets it and in what amounts.
Okay, I have a follow-up question to that. Is there a process of who evaluates on an annual basis that they're in compliance?
Yeah, that will be, correct me if I'm wrong, Aisha, but that will be a city plan requirement, correct? Or a city plan administered?
Correct. This is Aisha. That it would be similar to, so currently LCI has annual reporting forms for all of the projects that have any city subsidy in them, it would be a form that looks very similar to that one and based on that. And so it would be part of their annual review to ensure compliance.
And what is attached with that compliance? What are you looking for?
So that the developer would have to indicate which units are designated for the inclusionary zoning and provide some information about income levels and also some information, the current form, I believe, also has some information about demographics, just to, ensure that those dedicated IZ units are being rented to the people who qualify for them.
Okay. Are you asking them to provide you with financials?
Correct. The manager, as is done now, the project owner would submit an annual report on the IZ units.
Okay, and if they're not in compliance, who does the enforcement?
So if they're not in compliance, it becomes a permitting issue. That is, I mean, I think, the developer would, receive some notification about that. There's still, it could put their ongoing tax benefits at risk if they're not in compliance. So that is the kind of stick that the city maintains.
Okay, it hasn't happened in the past. What makes you sure that it's going to happen now?
That there would be issues with compliance?
Yes.
Or with, we don't, we think.
I think the issue is around enforcement.
Yeah, around enforcement. I think there's a number of different steps before the project is even leased up to ensure that the developer has a plan for for renting out the IZ units. And we're confident, as long as there's good communication and the annual reporting, that it would stay in compliance. And then in terms of actual enforcement and liens, I think it would go, it would go to, and I'll defer to our corp counsel on it, but there would be some kind of, enforcement action sent out that would, the ongoing tax abatement would be the, the leverage to ensure enforcement.
Before we proceed, I think this is a really important line of questioning, because I think enforcement is, as my colleague is saying, the key to all of this. I would like to invite colleagues to, at this point, to have questions specifically about just this new amendment text. And Alder Ferraro-Santana, I urge you strongly to come back to this line of questioning when we get back to the proposed letter whole after the public has a chance to go, because I do think it's crucial. So, great. Do colleagues have further questions about what Assistant Corporation Counsel Pinto has laid out for us specifically? I see none. So I thank you for laying out what is in the substitute text, and please stick around, because I think that colleagues may have many questions after public testimony. But at this point, I would like to move into public testimony on item number 1. So I see 20 some odd members of the public who are in the participants room. I am not sure whether or not everybody in there is planning on testifying or not, but given the Given the high volume of folks there, we're going to do our normal custom of limiting testimony to 3 minutes. I'm going to ask my vice chair, Alder Furlow, to keep the time. After 3 minutes, we will gently ask you to bring your testimony to a conclusion, just in deference to the fact that we want everyone to have a chance. I also see we've been joined by Alder Jill Marks. Welcome, Alder. So I will now make the call. Is there anybody here who wishes to be heard on item number 1? Anybody here from the public, I should say? So we've been joined by Kelly Blanchett. So Ms. Blanchett, if you would like to proceed, you may go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kelly Blanchett, and I'm a resident of Beaver Hills. I'm here to testify that if New Haven wants to see itself prosper, we need to give people the opportunity to live and work here and do it in a way that makes everyone feel safe, welcome, and supported. Affordable housing is a crisis for families who need housing, and it's a crisis for the economy of our city. So I have family who live in Steamboat Springs, and it's a town that attracts revenue from skiing. And they're experiencing this problem now. So they serve wealthy tourists, but many of the jobs are low-paying service industry jobs. So the cost of living in Steamboat is really high due to tourism, and the people who work in the service industry have been forced out of the city. So this means when a snowstorm hits Steamboat, the city shuts down, folks can't get to work. New Haven isn't a ski town, but as New Haven attracts more and more wealthy individuals, especially with new condo units, many families could be pushed out of the city. This breaks apart communities, puts a toll on our transportation system, and may even cause labor shortages. We need affordable housing, and we need higher pay and benefits in industries like the service industry. In 2015, I moved to New Haven from Brooklyn, where it was becoming regular practice for New Haven condos for new condos to set aside low-income units based on a lottery system. I've actually had many friends win these units, friends who were low-income by design due to pursuing artistic endeavors. These artists need affordable housing, but we also need to make sure our low-income families have access to affordable housing. New Haven specifically needs inclusionary zoning for our extremely and very low-income residents that helps keep our city running. It also needs to ensure that the affordable housing units that are generated by inclusive zoning are large enough to house families. So I also believe that sustainable, affordable housing needs an approach that expands beyond just this IZ proposal. In my time in New Haven, I've been a renter and homeowner. I've watched buildings go down, fires displace families, and more condos come up. Myself and my neighbors have vied for the attention of landlords, dealing with issues ranging from power, sewage, mold, garbage, and in buildings where city inspectors have come and gone. We have a group in Beaver Hills that's talking about these issues, but we can't do it alone. Further steps need to be taken to prevent gentrification, protect tenants, and hold absentee landlords accountable. New Haven has many one-noun LLC landlords that should be doing more to provide affordable, safe housing and should be more responsible to their tenants and our community. New Haven should not just plan for tax abatement with IZ, but set aside funds to uplift existing tenants who are in potentially exploitative leases. The city should review how landlords collect rent, how issues of blight, regular wear and tear, and maintenance are addressed or ignored. If we're going to advocate for the sustainability of new IZ, we should make sure that our hundreds-year-old buildings and those who own them can also support safe, equitable, and responsible housing. So just to close, I'd like to see myself as a lifelong resident of New Haven. When I picture that, I see our beautiful buildings in New Hallville, Beaver Hills, and the Hill, and I wonder how much longer they'll last, especially those that are not kept up and owned by these corporations. If those buildings go down and new condos go up, who's going to move in and where will people go? So thanks so much.
Thank you for your testimony. And before you go, could you just give us your address for the record as well, please?
Oh yes, Kelly Blanchett, 45 Glen Road.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. So before I call the next member of the public, as I mentioned, last public hearing, I know there were several folks who were just here to observe and who did not wish to testify. If you have the technological know-how and you're in the waiting room and you have a number in front of your name and you don't wish to testify, if you know how to remove that number, you can go ahead and do that. So I won't call on you. If you don't know how to do that, that's fine. And we'll clear it up when we get to you, but just in case. So I'm just going to start reading out then, the next couple of people so that folks can get ready. So next up, I believe we have Elias Estabrook, who has joined us here in the room. And then I see Linnell Schmidt is next on the list. And I also would like to welcome Alder Jeanette Morrison, who is a member of the Legislation Committee. Would you like to introduce yourself quickly, Alder? Alder Morrison, would you like to introduce yourself? You're still, there you go.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, can you repeat the question or the statement?
Oh, I was just asking if you would like to introduce yourself.
Oh, hello, everyone. I'm Alder Jeanette Morrison from the Dixville Ward 22 and member of the Legislative Committee. Thank you.
Welcome, Alder. Elias Estabrook, you're up.
Thank you. Good evening, Alders. Elias Estabrook, 380 Winthrop Avenue, New Haven. I'm adding a little bit to my testimony from the November public hearing, so thanks for the additional time. I think we need an inclusionary zoning ordinance, and I think ideally it would go farther than the proposal that city administrators have brought to this committee. But I also know that we need more than inclusionary zoning to address our city's affordable housing challenges. Really, the research from other cities tells us that it takes many measures to address affordable housing, and research and testimony we're hearing about New Haven at the Affordable Housing Commission also tells us this. And I think as a member of that commission, I'd like to continue to work hard on generating a broader set of policies for preventing displacement and building more affordable housing. So I hope we can bring some recommendations to this committee, to the board, for you to consider. As for inclusionary zoning, I think our city really needs inclusionary zoning to prevent further segregation of downtown and to create more affordable units within the areas that are seeing significant new development interests like Worcester Square, like Long Wharf, and other areas around downtown. And I think new developments really need to work for residents in need of housing opportunities and not just developers. I think the long-term deed restrictions are really important. I think these affordable units could be homes for residents, affordable homes for decades to come. And I think that's pretty significant. And I think inclusionary zoning is an important way to get market rate developers to really contribute, to chip in, and not just ignore the needs of many New Haven residents for housing that's more affordable. I have a couple examples. So in Cambridge, Massachusetts and Stamford, Connecticut, they've had policies for a couple decades. Cambridge, Massachusetts saw over 1,100 affordable units constructed under their policy. Stamford, Connecticut saw, as of 2018, 744 units built, and they had 295 other units pledged to be constructed. Stamford also has a trust fund where they got payments in lieu of units built, and they raised $23.6 million since 2003. So I think those are good ideas. They show us that other cities have been successful in making a dent and contributing some units. But I do think that it's hard for inclusionary zoning to build deeply affordable housing for people at 20% or 30% of the regional AMI. So I think we know there are other developers who will do that, now market rate developers, and I think it would be great to raise revenue and come up with other policies that can help build units for those sections of our communities where there really is a big need for more housing. So I think IZ is one step right now we should take soon, but there's more work to be done. So thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for your service on the City Plan Commission and on the Affordable Housing Commission. It's very important work, often thankless work. So we appreciate you taking the time. I see Alder Marchand nodding vigorously on the thankless part. We now have Linnell Schmidt, who will be followed by Nicole Neely. Linnell Schmidt, if you are with us, please turn your camera on and you may proceed. Please give us your name and address for the record.
Okay, my name is Linnell Schmidt. I live at 88 Parkside Drive in New Haven in the West Hills area. I'm here to testify in support of an inclusionary zoning policy that will help us rein in runaway housing costs and prevent more working people from being pushed out of New Haven. So I was born and raised in New Haven. My mom raised me and my siblings here. Before she got a stable job, it was a struggle because we also lived in Section 8 housing. But as we got older and she got a better job, a union job at Yale, our situation improved a little bit. I'm trying to make my own way. I'm working a decent job and starting a family, and it's not easy. So I grew up in New Haven. My family's here. My life's here. And I wish to stay, but it's just getting too expensive. My son's turning 4 soon and excited to become a big brother later this month. Our old apartment was too small and the water was dirty from old pipes. Sometimes it would back up into the tub and the landlord wouldn't do anything about it. So we needed to actually move into a bigger place. And efficiencies are the only thing even close to affordable, but with the growing family, it's simply not feasible for me. I want to not only be in the community where I grew up, but be close to my mom and my brothers so I can make sure my kids grow up around family. Childcare is also expensive, and many of us rely on support from family to offset costs while we're at work. But when we have to move spread out around the state, it breaks down that family and community fabric and gives us fewer options. I know a lot of people in similar situations who end up either leaving New Haven or living in properties owned by companies like Mandy Management or Pike or Ocean. But not only are many of them unsafe, unhealthy, and not maintained, even the mega landlords are asking for first and last month's rent and security deposit. So if rent is $1,500 for a small 2-bedroom apartment, then you have to pay $4,500 up front. And how's that easy for working people and folks starting families like me who want to stay in New Haven? I feel like we're being pushed out. And it's just not, what can I say? It's not realistic for some of us to put down $5,000 just to move into a small apartment. And that's basically it. I want to thank you for considering my story, and I hope we can come together to take steps to make sure that New Haven will be a place for all of us.
Thank you for sharing your story and thank you for coming down here tonight. Next up, we have Nicole Neely, who will be followed by Charlie Taylor. Nicole Neely, if you're ready, you can turn your camera on and give us your name and address for the record and proceed.
I'm sorry, I'm coming. I have time. Can you hear me?
You can, you may go ahead. Give us your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Nicole Neely, and I live at 13 Francis Hunter Drive. I was born in New Haven. I was raised in New York City. I came back to Connecticut in 1990. I came to the Dixville area about 2008, 10. And I've lived in Dixville, like about over 12 years now, and in New Haven most of my life. So I've been fortunate enough to buy a home here, and even I'm able to walk to work. So from what I've heard throughout the time from different people, that Dixville used to be a thriving, family-oriented community with plentiful good jobs, Black-owned businesses, and doctors and people who knew their neighbors and got involved. But as I see big changes underway, some of the apartments and things look nice, and that's going up on the lower Dixville area. And then I see the renovated Winchester lofts, which are very beautiful. And I don't think they're really affordable for a lot of people in our community at this time, but it's nice to see these things. So for what I pay in my mortgage, I don't think that I could probably even afford an efficiency in some of these buildings. And it's just not realistic for most of our people in this community. I have a daughter, and she's a single mom. She currently lives in Waterbury. She wants to move back here, but right now she's raising a son who's on the spectrum. He requires care and services. Right now she can't work enough hours to afford the current rents here in New Haven, and it's unfortunate. And where she is right now, some of her, things aren't working properly. She's currently being harassed, and she's feeling unsafe in her building right now with a neighbor who's been harassing her constantly. She really wants to come closer to her mom so that I can help her with childcare. And it's just not affordable for her and feasible for her. What we're doing to make sure lifelong community members and single mothers like my daughter are safe and welcome her back here, I don't see, really that being possible at the time. That's why I encourage the Board of Alders to pass inclusive zoning so that it would require developers here to build affordable units so that, I pay taxes and I work hard. I work in New Haven. I live here, and I want to feel like the city sees us and supports us. We deserve neighborhoods with good jobs, quality, affordable housing and services and businesses geared to our community, not just Yale people and wealthy people that's out of town and coming here working, and they work here, they go back to their beautiful homes out of town. So the policy won't fix all of our problems, but it will send a message that we matter and that the city is listening to our cries against gentrification and displacement. And I'm just hoping that, some of these changes and things can be fixed for the people in our community. Thank you so much for the time. Have a good evening.
Thank you for your testimony. Have a good evening as well.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
So long.
Bye-bye.
Next up, we've got Charlie Taylor, who will be followed by Jamie Myers McPhail and Jewel, and I cannot see Jewel's last name on my screen, but they will be next. But Charlie Taylor, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Charlie Taylor, and for the record, I live at 42 Walnut Street in New Haven. I just wanted to thank everyone for being here tonight. Whether you're testifying or hearing the public's testimonies, this is very important. I've lived in New Haven for 17 years now, and for the entirety of my time here, I've been living in what I would politely call substandard housing. Most people I know who live in this city have at some point had to put aside concerns about health or safety and any other tenants' rights in order to afford a place to live, in order to afford shelter. That's the case in most urbanized areas. New Haven is not unique in that way. It's unfortunate, but that is the case across the country. We all saw people lose their homes in 2008. Housing has been an issue far beyond this point. It's just at critical mass now. As we continue to live through COVID-19 and all the implications this has on people with inadequate or no housing options. It just highlights the importance of this kind of thing. It was easier to ignore before, I guess. I'm here to urge you to pass this inclusionary zoning policy because I believe it can begin to help address some of the issues residents face in regards to affordable housing. I want to point out, by no means is this policy enough on its own. It's going to take a lot of different means to expand and diversify in a consequential way how we provide safe, clean, and affordable housing. But providing incentives to developers for including a certain percentage of affordable housing is a good start. In the past couple of years, there's been a great deal of development in New Haven. Everyone's seen it. As a resident, for me, it looks like mostly luxury apartment complexes and Yale properties, two things that I feel no ownership over, and I know a bunch of people don't. I find this disheartening as someone who can just afford my own apartment with my partner at the 34. I moved here when I was 17. That means for as long as I've been a resident of this city, the length of my life before moving here, I lived in apartments with absentee landlords and too many roommates in order to afford rent. There's too many people like that. And personally, I have graduated from Southern I have a degree. I worked my whole way through Southern. After Southern, I had to work multiple jobs. Now I've worked at Yale for 5 years as a casual, and I still struggle to afford rent in New Haven. And there's plenty of people who grew up here who haven't had the options that I've had that all are also struggling far worse. It's a staggering thing. So, I think housing along with unemployment are some of the issues that need to be faced directly. And this is, like I said, a really good start, but it's only a beginning. The cost of housing is becoming exorbitant. Rent is going up faster than wages or the availability of jobs with a living wage. And these things aren't going to change unless we start changing them. And I think this inclusionary zoning policy, like I said, is a necessary beginning, but I urge you to move forward with this policy and continue efforts towards making New Haven an affordable place for all of its residents to make the city what it is and see what it could be. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it. Next up, we have Jamie Myers McPhail and I believe Jewel, whose last name I was unable to see. And they will be followed by Jacob Culver.
Well, you can go ahead, Jewel.
Hi, my name is Jewel White. I live at 116 Main Street in West Haven. However, I was a lifelong resident of New Haven until I couldn't find an affordable place to stay at for my son and myself. That's why I'm here to support the inclusionary zoning for New Haven that will require large development projects to include units that are actually affordable to people like me. I moved to West Haven after going through a divorce where my ex-husband filed for bankruptcy and my credit was ruined after that. When I was married, I owned a house, but after my divorce, I had to rent a room to try to get my credit rebuilt. I wanted to be in New Haven, and I still do, but there aren't many affordable places in New Haven, as well as safe neighborhoods that I feel comfortable going to. And it seems that there's 3 major developers that own most of the rentals in New Haven, Mandy, Pike, and Ocean, and they're not good at repairing their properties. I moved to West Haven because I found a place in a quiet neighborhood right on the bus line, and it included heat and hot water. But I really wish New Haven had more options for middle and low income people like me and my son. Even when we qualified for benefits, it wasn't easy, but with me and my son working, it puts us over the income limits. So I have to pay everything out of my pocket, and I know he wants to work, so I encourage him him to work. But with both of us working, there's no affordable housing. This not only hurts us as individuals, but I believe it weakens and breaks down our neighborhood communities. People are unstable, moving a lot and working multiple jobs, so they don't have their
1 minute, please.
their neighbors that they can rely on or keep an eye on. I just wish there was more affordable housing, safe housing options for people like myself who want to do right, but I almost have to not work and make a decent income to be able to afford to live. So thanks for allowing me the opportunity to speak before you all.
Thank you very much for speaking. Next up, we have Jacob Culver, who will be followed by Melissa Singleton.
Apologies, I was not in the panelist room yet. Thank you for hearing my testimony. My name is Jacob Culver. I live at 371 Alden Avenue. I'm a graduate student worker at Yale and a leader in Local 33, the Yale Graduate Student Worker Union. I'm here to speak in favor of inclusionary zoning laws and more affordable housing in New Haven. I work full-time as a researcher at Yale in the cell biology department, and I'm paid a salary that is supposed to cover the basic cost of living in New Haven. However, in the last 7 years that I've lived in and around New Haven, my rent has steadily increased, and the only new housing that I've seen getting added to the city seems to be luxury apartments. Rent by far is my largest expense, and the cost of living is continuously increasing in New Haven. And over my time as a graduate student, this has prevented me from building up much of a financial safety net. And I'm now realizing that my job ends in January and I'm on the job market. And not knowing when or where I'll be working next is stressful enough, but that job search is also stressful because I am unsure on how to cover the cost of my housing if there is a gap in my employment as I'm searching for new work. Because right now I won't be able to afford my current apartment for more than 2 months if I'm not able to find a position. So that's why I'd like to come here and speak in favor of passing laws to protect and expand affordable housing to keep New Haven accessible for everyone and not just people who can live in those new luxury apartments. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it. We next will have Melissa Singleton, who will be followed by Carrie Ellington.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Melissa Singleton. My address is 416 Edgewood Avenue in New Haven. I am a longtime resident of New Haven. I grew up in the New Hallville section during the times of just Black excellence all the way around. I'm actually testifying against the inclusionary zoning because I also feel that there's a lack of knowledge as far as what the inclusionary zoning is and how it is being interpreted to the community, because I really don't think that all the details of this zoning policy is being transparent in a sense. I don't think that the details of what's really being done as far as this inclusionary zoning is being addressed. And I feel as though with the approval of the zoning will also allow for Yale to come in and start buying up and changing areas within the residents of the Dixwell Avenue area. So I feel as though that there will not be enough affordable housing, which we all know that there is no affordable housing, and the uprise of all these high-rise apartments that are all being built throughout the city. We all know that those are not affordable for anyone that's looking for a property or looking for affordable rentals. All these apartments that are being built, they're being outside sourced. the investors are outside investors, and we have all the properties that are available, that were available, that could have been affordable housing or affordable rentals are being bought out by Pike and Manny Management. And we all know that they do not take care of the properties, which we've all seen them in the courts, but the city is still allowing them to buy up all the properties. And I just feel as though with this zoning, that it's going to increase and it's going to put a lot of more people pushed out. And it's going to continue to grow the gentrification within the city. I think it's going to continue to do a displacement within the city. And I don't think that it's really, I think it really needs to be looked at. And I really feel as though that that you guys really should take in consideration and speaking to the people directly to find out, how this will affect them, because I feel as though these decisions are being made behind closed doors without the public's knowledge and their awareness. So I think that I'm against the zoning. So thank you all for my testimony and have a great evening.
Thank you for the testimony and for sharing that, and have a great evening as well. Carrie Ellington, who will be followed by, sorry, give me a moment here, Abby Feldman. Carrie Ellington, you can, you're here already, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I am in support of a truly inclusionary zoning policy. This is not that. This is actually exclusionary. This policy is not just set for downtown, which I heard a lot of participants who commented say. This policy is for tier 2 and tier 3 areas. Tier 2 areas like Dixwell neighborhood, tier 2 areas like Fairhaven. This inclusionary zoning policy will lead to further unaffordability in tier 2 and tier 3 areas. The proposal only requires that developers set aside 5% of new units for lower income residents in those areas. This plan incentivizes new construction to basically be 95% affordable areas like Dixwell and Fairhaven, where affordability is typically lowest compared to the rest of the city. The city of New Haven is essentially subsidizing the construction of unaffordable housing in tier 2 and tier 3 areas where affordable housing is needed most. This plan will erode away the fabric of existing affordability in communities like Dixwell and surrounding neighborhoods for our low income and working class residents. That's the first point. The percentage of affordability needs to be extremely deeper than 5%. 5% is not enough for new developments, new market rate developments being constructed in the Dixwell neighborhood, in the Fairhaven neighborhood, and in neighborhoods surrounding in tier 2 and tier 3 areas. It's not okay to have a one size fits all policy. We've seen what policies like that have done. For instance, I'm having a blank here, but the model cities policies, how they kind of destroyed the fabric of New Haven in the 60s. We don't want to apply a one size fits all policy. I think it's important to be nuanced and to look at these different tiers and the requirements in these different tiers. Inclusionary zoning is not based off of real incomes of residents who live in New Haven's working class communities. The city proposal uses regional income levels that factor in suburban towns. We do not make the same amount of money as residents in Guilford, Milford, or Branford. The city is marketing this plan as inclusive for working class families, but most of the new construction in the city is studio 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. So for the families that I heard needed housing, these market rate units will not be suitable for you unless there's something in the plan requiring that there be 3 and 4 bedrooms, which there isn't. If this policy were truly inclusionary, the city would use neighborhood income levels of Dixwell, Newhallville, Fairhaven, instead of regional income levels, and provide deeply affordable housing and have large enough units for families. I hope y'all hear me. Inclusionary zoning will create a net loss of affordable housing in neighborhoods and communities neighboring downtown. Luxury developments are already increasing rapidly. Many luxury developments or market rate developments are being planned and built in Black and Latinx working class communities like Dixwell. The proposed set-aside units will have higher rents than the housing they replaced, creating a net loss of actual affordable housing. Sam Stein talks about this in his book, Capital City. I'll reference it to you all in an email. The other thing is the screening and selection of tenants. It's hard for Black and Latinx tenants who are being displaced out of Pike and Mandy properties to be properly screened. They're being discriminated against because they're using credit scores to tell tenants that they cannot even see apartments. So what makes our city thinks that we can enforce a policy that doesn't actually have enforcement teeth?
That's time.
And inform the way developers select and choose tenants in an equitable way. If there's no equity written into the way that tenants are selected, then we're missing the ball and we're weaponizing something that is supposed to be meeting the need of community against those communities this policy is supposed to be serving. The enforcement, there's none. I heard Aisha say that there will be some annual report that will be able to determine. None of that is specific and tooth enough, if that's a word, if you could work with me here, to really ensure that developers are being equitable and being inclusionary. And in addition, this money, this payment in lieu should not be suffice. And there's not enough teeth and grit in how this payment will be dispersed and used equitably in the city. I wish I had more time. I'd probably use my 3 minutes, but I think that this needs to really be looked at and not rushed through if you all are trying to meet the greater need for affordable housing in the city.
Thank you for sharing your perspective. We do just need your address for the record as well, please.
I'm right here at my 1375 Chapel Street, a Pike property, which is rapidly being gentrified.
Thank you.
Apartment.
Thank you. Thank you again for your perspective. Next up is Abby Feldman, who will be followed by, where's my number 11, by Gigi Rivera.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Abby Feldman. I live at 17 Stevenson Road. I'm here tonight to testify in favor of inclusionary zoning. I am an organizer with New Haven Rising. Throughout my conversations with so many residents, almost every single person brings up the need for more affordable housing, not just more affordable housing, but better housing options for residents in our city. Our residents are seeing countless luxury apartments that are being constructed where so few New Haveners, if any, could really consider moving into due to prohibitive rent costs. Inclusionary zoning appears to be one way that we can ensure that at least a certain portion of new units being built are affordable and accessible to New Haven residents. But I do want to point out that while inclusionary zoning seems to be a good step towards that, it's not alone going to solve our affordable housing crisis. In the Hill, where I organize, many residents are quick to point out that it's not just affordability, but also density, where parking is definitely an issue. Where housing becomes more dense, is parking going to continue to be so strained in our neighborhoods? And that needs to be addressed. Neighbors are also pointing out that new developments are catering to people who are seeking 1 or 2 bedroom apartments or studios, which, as some other testimonies were indicating, is not actually suitable for larger families. And so that should be looked into. And there's also the issue about, renting and having affordable rents is really important. But I think in addition to this inclusionary zoning and having affordable rents, there needs to be something done about home ownership in New Haven, and more residents are talking about the wanting to have more options to actually buy homes. And so that's a big piece of affordability and also the quality of life in our city. And we should have more ways for residents to continue to grow roots in our city and invest in their family and in the community. So affordable inclusionary zoning is a good step, and I think we should continue to look for more solutions. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Gigi Rivera. Then this has jumped out of order on my screen. Apologies. Well, I'll tell you who's next in a moment. I also want to recognize Alder President Taisha Walker-Myers, who has joined us. Gigi Rivera, when you're ready, you can come off mute and give us your name and address for the record and then proceed.
Hi, can you hear me?
Indeed, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay, hi. My name is, well, it's listed as Gigi Rivera, but my name is Adair Franklin Rivera. I live at 341 West Division Street. I am definitely against this inclusionary zoning because it's not inclusionary in the way that people think it is. First of all, as Carrie stated earlier, the AMI that they're going off is not the AMI of the people who actually live in the area. And if you turn around and you go off of the AMI of people who don't live in the area, guess what? You're not going to have affordable housing for the people of the area. Also, like they stated before, and the fact that it's going to be studio, 1 or 2 bedrooms, where are these families going to live where there's 2 to 3 kids? It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand. I need for them to deeply make me understand what's going on here because it's not going to be affordable. It's not going to be affordable, and it's not going to be beneficial to the people of the community, period. Me being one of the people of the community, I could tell you right now, I know of several different people who, like Carrie stated before, the credit checks, it's keeping them from even being seen as a tenant, okay? And as I forgot her name, I believe her last name was Schmidt, but she also stated $4,500 because she had to pay first, last, in that month's rent. At the end of the day, they're going to be asking for that and more because guess what? They're not even going off the AMI of the people of New Haven. So if you're turning around and you're going off the AMI of somebody who lives somewhere else and they earn more money than you do currently, it's not going to add up. I don't agree with it, period. And I don't vote for it. I'm so against it. And I do appreciate you listening to me. I know I got a lot more to say, but I am definitely blanking out because my emotions are running high. And as they said, it is disheartening. It's disheartening for the fact that you're bringing something here that's supposed to be beneficial for the people, and it appears not to be. I just wish that people, like they said before, was more educated on everything that's going on. 5% out of 100% of the housing? Are you serious? And just affordable? No, we need deeply affordable. Affordable isn't enough. Affordable is what we supposedly already have, and we don't have that. So my name is Adair Franklin Rivera once again. I appreciate you listening to me and my testimony, and you have a great day. Well, night.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for taking the time. Have a great evening as well.
Mm-hmm.
So next up, I see Darren Said, and I also see Lily Chambers with their hand up in the attendees list. If there are other folks who are currently in the attendees room who have not yet testified but would like to on this item, please raise your Zoom hand at this time. But while we're waiting on that, Darren Said, if you're with us, you can turn on your camera and please give your name and address for the record, and then you may proceed.
Good evening, everybody. Darren Side, 260 West 91st Street, New York, New York. Suite 1A is my office. I'm constructing at 44 Olive Street and in development at 20 Fair Street in New Haven. Thank you all for your, everybody, the members of the public, the testimony, the Board of Alders, Chair, all the city officials, and everybody for your contributions tonight and always. I just want to be real brief. I'm actually home right now and I have some kids in the background, but I sent an email after the last or around the time of the last meeting that had a lot of details, a couple different options. I am a big supporter of inclusionary zoning as a policy. I'm a big supporter of it as a businessman even, but it must be done in a manner that continues to keep investment rolling into the city, because without the investment dollars rolling into the city, the affordable units or whatever they're going to create in this inclusionary zoning policy, they will not get built if that money stops rolling into the city. And that's so important. And if done improperly, and I've said this on many of these meetings already, if done improperly, it can dry up the investment in the city, therefore nullifying all of the hard work done by so many people. And I have a lot of unpopular things to say, and it's tough that they're unpopular, but it's just the truth of the matter. I'm in the capital markets. I'm in the hard cost markets. I understand what it costs to build these buildings, rent these buildings, stabilize these buildings. We can't just ask. I wrote a story in this email about like Jack's Steakhouse. Imagine you ask Jack's Steakhouse to, shave their prices down by 40%, 80%, and continue to stay in business. They would have to bump the prices of the remaining percentage, right? So in doing so, it creates more of a gap. It's a tough example to think about, but
1 minute, please.
That's the bottom line. Yeah, thank you. That's the bottom line. They would have to raise prices on the unencumbered stake, let's call it. The unencumbered units would have to raise prices, creating a deeper divide. And so if not done properly, if not giving the proper tax abatement or the proper incentive programs, something that actually makes sense, or a burn off of the program after 10 years, but you have to maintain these units for 99 years of tax growth, expense growth, but burn off the tax abatement after 10 years, only do the tax abatement on 30% of the entire building. All due respect, Stephen Riley and your team, this is not done in real life numbers. And I would love to be part of that discussion. I've offered that many times. I would be happy to find a solution to this for everybody. I think there's a way to do it. I think there's a way to cover more affordable units, more wide range of AMI, help out more people and bring in more tax revenue if this is done properly. I am a staunch believer in inclusionary zoning. I believe this is the beginning of a beautiful project where we're headed, but I really think you need developer input to get to somewhere that's actually sustainable for the city and continues to bring in investment dollars, which will create the affordable units. I encourage everyone to read that email that I put together last month. It has a lot of detail in there, and I'm open for a discussion at any time with individuals or with a group. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your time. Lily Chambers is up next. Lily Chambers, if you're there, you can turn on your camera, come off mute, give us your name and address.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Name and address for the record, please.
I'm sorry about that. Trying to work the camera, but it doesn't seem to want to work right.
That's all right. Just give us your name and address, and then you can proceed with your
It's
testimony.
Lily Chambers. I live at 339 West Division Street in New Haven. I'm all set?
You are. Proceed.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having this meeting today. But I am not in favor of the inclusionary zoning, only if it was inclusionary. It is definitely exclusionary. The city is hiring a third party per the developers to require or to put together a guide or a manual on how to pick or screen and manage tenants per the new builds. Why would you hire someone from outside? And again, per the developers. This is not in favor of the residents, because the only thing that LCI, from what I'm understanding, is going to do is do the recertifications for these tenants for the so-called affordable housing, which again, 5% is not enough. Now, I know last time you guys didn't mention that credit checks was an issue for folks who are looking for residents. but you never came up with a solution or an idea how to solve that problem. Because until that goes away, it's going to be hard for anyone to afford any of these units that are being built. And then with the in lieu fees, or the opt-out fees as I call them, I understand from what you were stating that LCI would take the funds and dispense it and divide it among your already affordable housing programs. But the programs you have now are not working. So I think you need to go another route and try to create 100% affordable with those funds if you were to obtain them. And again, the AMI should reflect those who live in New Haven and not that of a Guilford or and outside of New Haven. Now, I was listening to a lot of people talking this evening.
1 minute.
The
please.
gentleman just said that, you don't want money rolling out of New Haven. Nothing for nothing. Yale is here in New Haven, and they don't pay much in taxes. Money will never stop rolling in New Haven. Okay? And this inclusionary zoning is in favor of the developers, not so much the residents. The luxury apartments that are being built and that are up already, they're per the developers. They have nothing to do with the residents. And that needs to be made clear as well. So now, one of the things I did want to mention is that when I, in our group, PCD, met with one of the developers about 1.5 years ago from Per Munson Street, out of the 30 homes that he was going to build, we inquired if he was going to offer home ownership to residents of New Haven. Do you know he said, no, not a one. A 3-bedroom house you're going to rent for $3,400. I don't know anyone in New Haven, especially Black and brown community, who can afford that. And this is per the developers. This plan, again, is in favor of the developers, not necessarily the residents. Now, I'm all for it if it was inclusionary, but it's not. It's exclusionary. And to me, it is gentrification, new way of redlining, and displacement at best. So I just need you to understand that a lot of folks who are testifying this evening, I hear a lot of Yale employees and those who may not be from the Black and brown community. It needs to be transparent, which it is not. So again, I'm not in favor. So thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you for your testimony. Have a good evening. I see no more hands raised in the attendees list, so I will make the call. Is there anybody else from the public who wishes to be heard on this item at this time? A second time, is there anybody from the public who wishes to be heard on item number 1, the inclusionary zoning item at this time? Reminding folks that we have an item number 2 coming up as well. And a third time, is there anyone from the public who wishes to be heard on this item at this time? I don't see anybody, so I'm now going to invite colleagues on the legislation committee. If any of you have questions for any of the city staff who are here presenting this item, now would be the time to ask them. I'll give folks a minute to think any questions through. I have a couple of my own, but I will let other members of the committee go first. If other members of the committee are thinking of questions, I'll go ahead and ask a couple of my own. One question that's been on my mind throughout this process, I think that obviously the goal of inclusionary zoning, as far as it goes, is to actually increase the number of affordable units, and that we don't want to make the option of basically paying instead of building units like too attractive, because we want units, we want apartments. I would like to hear a little bit more about how you all are envisioning the payment in lieu would work, and what exactly are going to be the city's options with that fund.
I'm happy to take a pass at that. This is Aisha Woods, Director of City Plan. The payment in lieu fund would go into an affordable housing dedicated account or trust fund, and it would be dedicated to supporting affordable housing in other projects. This is something that was, envisioned in the Affordable Housing Task Force. It would, be administered through LCI for, to support additional affordable housing projects.
One thing I would add to that, this is Stephen Riley with HRNA Advisors, part of the consultant team. One thing I would
Mr.
add
Riley,
to
can
that,
you give us an address for the record as well, please? Thank you.
yes, I live in Washington, D.C. One other thing I would add to Aisha's comments as it relates to this is actually, sorry, I'll pause for now, but come back to it.
Okay. I have one other question for right now before I'm going to pass to Alder Marchand, but I'll call on Corporation Counsel Pinto first.
Yeah, just let me, and correct me if I'm wrong, Aisha, and Stephen, but my understanding was that and this goes to Alder Decker, Chairman Decker's question as to, in effect, making it a deterrent. My understanding is that we had set the per unit cost on the payment in lieu effectively high enough that it's a deterrent that why pay that it in effect becomes why pay the money when you can simply build a unit. That it's in effect becomes the per unit cost. So you almost sort of, it ends up, if not doubling, then very close to doubling the per unit cost to construct it if you did not participate in, if you sought to opt out.
Yes, that's correct. We sought to be strategic in terms of how we sized what that in lieu fee would be. And so in thinking through how to price that, understanding what the sort of opportunity cost is of providing an affordable unit versus a market rate unit on site in a given project. And then to your point, Michael, adding a premium to that to essentially encourage the on-site production of units. So you're not eliminating the opportunity to use the in lieu fee option, and there are some benefits to that in terms of providing funding to support the production of housing types that wouldn't necessarily be built by the market. So to the comments that some others brought up earlier, larger units in certain areas that may not see market rate investment, supportive housing or other types of housing that again just aren't built by the market. So there are benefits to that, but the idea of the policy and the way that it's been designed as proposed is to encourage that on-site production of units. Does it answer your question?
It does. So in other words, there are two options for developers that to be in compliance with this law, should this law take effect. Option one is to build the affordable units at the level that the law stipulates. Option two would be to pay into this affordable housing trust fund instead of building the units, but the law as it's been presented to us is constructed such that we think that this payment instead of building is a less desirable option. It's an option, but ultimately it's going to make their costs higher because what we really want is the units. Do I have that right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's one question I have sort of on the structural level. I have one additional question right now on the individual level, which I'm curious about, which is, so let's say that, an individual or a family at the at the below the AMI level for affordability, or at the AMI level, gets rents one of these units. What then happens if, say, they get a $20,000 raise, the following year? Does their lease not get renewed going forward? Does that unit's now count as not affordable and a different unit has to open up affordable, or what's the plan there?
Yeah, so this is something that comes up often with affordable housing, and sought to apply a similar policy that's used by HUD and others with other housing programs that exist, which there's an allowance above the AMI level as set in terms of tenant's income. So in the case of this IZ policy, a tenant, if they get a raise, we don't want to penalize them for that, and they would be able to go up to 140% of the allowable income at the AMI that they were previously qualified at. And so that provides sort of additional leeway in terms of making sure that you're not evicting a tenant because they got a raise.
Great, thanks for that explanation. I have no further questions just at this time. I will recognize Alder Marchand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to, for a moment, don my Vice Chair of Finance cap and think with you, staff, about possible budgetary impacts of implementing this. And I imagine it would be if there's a need for additional staff to provide oversight. So I know, of course, that the trust fund is not a general fund expense, but I think it's probably going to be something that the Finance Committee will want to see mentioned at least sometimes in the monthly financial reports. So just note to that, make a note of that. But for now, if you could comment on your vision over time as more of these units come online and there's a growing need for oversight and yearly statement checks and such, do you think we're going to need more general fund positions in finance or wherever in order, LCI, in order to provide for the administration of this program?
This is Aisha. I can comment on that. I do think, again, this program is not going to result in a sudden explosion of these IZ units. It's very much an incremental program, and so compared to, I'm just going to speak on behalf of my LCI colleagues, but they're already doing compliance work and doing some of this, doing some of this kind of work. So it's definitely, within, their kind of their program area. I do imagine, over time, it may, definitely benefit to have somebody dedicated to administering this particular program as it ramps up as time goes on, as we get more and more units in the program. I think speaking from the city plan side, it adds, there's a number of different compliance requirements that track with, the development application. That is something, it's fairly straightforward. So I don't think that would require, somebody, a new position in city plan per se, but I think, over time it, may benefit from a dedicated position in LCI who could then collaborate with city plan on the front end side.
Thank you, Director Woods. My next question is,
I think we'd be in a good position if we were actually looking at, do we need more staff oversight? That means we're getting both more market rate and more affordable rate, and more IZ, construction.
I appreciate that observation, Assistant Corp Counsel Pinto. I agree. That would be an interesting problem, probably a good problem to have. So now I've forgotten my second question. Hold on a second. Okay, now I remember. This is what happens when you turn 50. We've heard very little so far in the public hearing process, either here before the legislation committee or before the city plan commission, from developers and the attorneys who represent them. We've heard a little bit. I'm glad that Mr. Seid came and gave his perspective, but we haven't heard very much from them. I'm wondering if you have, right? The city plan department has contacts with developers all the time who are submitting applications for all sorts of things. And are they making inquiries? Are they expressing opinions? What can you share about the feedback you've gotten from the development community about this ordinance amendment?
Sure, I'm happy to take that. I also see that our Deputy Economic Development Director, Stephen Fontana, is in the audience, so we could also pull him in to talk about that a little bit. I think some of the concerns that we've heard are in line with what Mr. Seid said earlier. There were some concerns about the length of the affordability requirement, some concerns about the tax abatement, being shorter than the length of affordability. So these are, I'm just repeating some of the concerns that we heard. I think there's definitely excitement about the New Haven market and, concerns that something might dampen that excitement generally, because, I think there's a bit, more developers will come to where development is happening. So if there is a dampening, due to a perception that it's not, feasible to do a project, that will also discourage other developers who may be considering. So, there is some apprehension about it. I see that Steve is on. I don't know if you had any other specific concerns that came to you.
Thank you, Aisha. Yes, for the record, I'm Steve Fontana, Deputy Director of Economic Development. I reside at 23 Angel Place in North Haven. And to your question, Alder Marchand, developers have a range of opinions, as you might expect. There are some who are intrigued by the idea of working within the IZ ordinance and pursuing additional projects here. There are others who are deeply ambivalent, others like Mr. Seid, who have expressed various reservations about the design of the program. So there's no one view of it. I can certainly say unequivocally that they are not all in favor of it, despite what some might have represented during the testimony in the public. There are some who are not in favor of it. So I think generally speaking, they're uncertain how it will work and how it will affect their any projects they wish to pursue here over time down the road, especially with the cost of supplies and raw materials, ping-ponging back and forth, and inflation and other matters. So they have specific things that they would like to see changed, perhaps, but we obviously have brought you a proposal that we believe is coherent and sensible. And so we'd like to see it implemented, and then if necessary, make changes down the road if they're necessary. Hopefully I answered your question, Alder. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Director Fontana. I appreciate that. My last question, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity, goes back to the question of enforcement, and it's more about the front end. I think you spoke a little bit about the back end, which is how do you monitor and administer the ongoing paperwork, every year's submission and reports and such. But how do you envision developers being notified up front about this requirement? Is it, are you going to change your forms? Is it any application for site plan or special permit or special exception will include a checkbox saying, is it in such and such a zone? Are you going to build, are you is it a zoning compliance checkbox you're adding to things? How do you make sure that nothing slips through the cracks and all the developers building residential developments in the subject areas are aware of this requirement and what they need to do? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. This is Aisha, City Plan Director, and again, I'll take a first, just kind of outline the approach and call on Stephen Riley, to get into it in more specificity. But there's, as you, Alder Marchand, are aware from your capacity on the City Plan Commission, there's a number of different steps in the permitting process. So one is typically, a pre-application meeting, especially, it's not required, but particular projects, we often meet ahead of the actual formal development application just to, get a better understanding of the project. At that time, we would education on the requirements. Those would also be very apparent, on the website where people go to find out about zoning or development applications. At the point of the site plan application or development application, there would be a checklist at that point. The developer would have to indicate which of the benefits they were intending to use in the, which of the zoning incentives, and also show, indicate how they were going to meet the IZ requirements in terms of the plans. So, when it came before site plan review, that would have to be spelled out in the site plan review. And that's where you could, ensure that the units were being equitably distributed throughout the project, and that they were meeting the other zoning parameters. Once it goes through the site plan review, there's usually a little bit of time between that and going for building permit. At building permit, there'd be a more rigorous, submission of an actual marketing plan. And then once again, prior to lease up, particularly with the voucher priority units, there's a process wherein, the units need to be inspected. There's a very, defined process that the housing authority uses for those, those specific units. So that would have to happen in advance of lease up. And then prior to certificate of occupancy is another, one of those levers where we could check to make sure that the project was fully compliant. Stephen, did you want to add anything to that in terms of the specific types of documentation we'd be looking for during that process?
Yeah, I think your response is exactly right. And in terms of documentation or what that looks like, during the, as part of the development application itself for site plan review, all projects would fill out an additional form, really to go along with the other site plan information that they're submitting, specific to inclusionary zoning, and based on what's being proposed, the number of and types of inclusionary units that would be included as part of that development. And so as part of that site plan review, the idea is that with the site plan approval, they'll also get their sort of inclusionary zoning certification that shows the documentation that they have outlined appropriately what would meet the requirements of the policy. And this gets at really upfront, making sure that at every step of even the development process, that there's a clear understanding of what the expectation is in terms of the affordable units that will be provided. And then, as Aisha also mentioned, there'd be a marketing plan that the developers would produce that would essentially, again, provide a clear plan for how the units are going to be marketed to prospective tenants. Tenants will be screened, and and ensuring that, there's a clear process for both identifying, potential applicants, filling those units, and getting tenants in those IZ units.
Thank you, Mr. Riley, and thank you, Director Woods, for those responses. I imagine that you're preparing those forms in anticipation of this ordinance hopefully passing and being implemented. And I, for one, would be curious to see drafts of those forms at some point. If you could share them, I would make that request through the chair, of course. But it gives me greater confidence and comfort that this is moving in a very strong direction to know more about how it would be implemented. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Marchand. Any other colleagues from the committee have any other questions for staff at this time? You can either raise your virtual hand or your real hand. Any other committee members? I don't see any. So given that, I think we can move to our second item on the agenda this evening. Just to remind folks, I will read that item again, which is OR 2021-0018, which is the ordinance text amendment to Chapter 13 of the New Haven Code of Ordinances, establishing a vacant building registration program as part of the fire code. So we thank the city staff for their second consecutive meeting of a thorough presentation on IZ. And I will invite the makers of the second item, which may be some of the same people, or maybe not, to join us here.
Good evening, Alders, Decker, and as the chair and vice chair and majority leader Furlow, the other Alders, city staff, and public and residents. Thank you for the opportunity to present a little more clarification. I do not have screen capabilities at this time.
If staff could please provide the chief with screen share capabilities, that would be great.
That would be excellent. Good evening to you all. Alder Decker, chair, vice chair Furlow, and majority leader. Board of Alders, the committee, Madam President, city staff, residents, and my fellow coworkers and team. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present something I've been trying to get off the ground for a couple of years now. It is a vacant building registration program. So just give me a hot second. I just received that permission. Go back into the screen and pick the right screen this time. Excellent. Thank you. Considering the hour, I will truncate this to a certain extent. It won't be the 40 slides that I prepared for you. I'm kidding. We'll just begin.
And we begin tonight with breaking news out of New Haven. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Spiros. Fire crews are on the scene of a house fire right now. It broke out on Blatchley Avenue, right near Grand Avenue, about an hour ago. News 8's Renee Schmiel is live on the scene with the very latest. Renee.
Brian, crews have gotten this fire under control. I'm stepping out of the shot to give you a look at what it looks like right now. As you can see, the roof of this house collapsed and there's visible damage on all 3 floors. But this is a look of what the fire looked like just about half an hour ago or so. You can see those flames, and we could see the flames from a few blocks away, and the smoke could be seen as far away from the Pearl Harbor Memorial Bridge, I'm told. So this is what crews have been dealing with. But again, they have gotten the fire under control. They're now working to put out hot spots, but the roof did collapse. And of course, when the houses are as close together as these are, one of the concerns is that the fire could spread. And that's exactly what happened. There's visible damage to the house next door to this one. Some of the siding has melted and there's some damage to the roof, but officials tell me the house where the fire started was reported as vacant, and they tell me that there are no reported injuries at this time, but they're continuing to investigate. The New Haven Fire Investigation Unit is here on the scene trying to piece together what exactly happened. But neighbors are here taking a look at what happened. Everybody's kind of shaken up, seeing what's been going on over here, and several of the roads around here, including Blanchely Avenue here and Monroe Street, are closed as crews investigate.
So what I wanted to share with you is that vacant building fires are highly unpredictable. We sometimes, in that fire instance, that vacant building had open roofs and open floors. And so through weather rot, through folks going in and vandalizing the property, the fire burned very quickly, very fast. And we weren't able to get to the top floors to put it out very quickly. So it allowed it to spread to other buildings that were not involved at the time. Vacant buildings increase the number of fire fatalities and injuries. In Connecticut, the number is 2.5 deaths per 1,000. But we can tell you it's actually 785 firefighters have died since 2013 in vacant buildings. We have the statistics for residential structures, but also we have them for commercial fires as well. 2017, there were 24,000 fireground operational injuries, and 140 firefighters died on the job. And that was in general in all types of fires. Vacant buildings by themselves, they attract unsheltered residents and squatters. There is a theory in the police department about broken or boarded windows, and you can be on either side of that, pro or con. But what we know in the fire service is that when buildings are not maintained, when they're not secured, when they're abandoned, they attract arsonists, drug dealers and drug users, sex crimes, human trafficking, raccoons, rodents, roaches, oh my. The New Haven vacant building program used to be run by the fire department 25 years ago. It became a hybrid project between the building department, fire, and LCI. By having that building program run by the firefighters who are out doing their regular district familiarization, we're looking at the buildings from a different angle. We're looking at ways that firefighters can get hurt, how fires can spread to other structures, and also the prolonged operation that we have. And the longer we fight a fire, the higher risk there is for injury and for death. But also by having a vacant building program, we prevent deterioration and unsafe conditions. The policy is coming back to the New Haven Fire Department. This is through an agreement with LCI and the building official, Jim Tercio. I will save you from showing the Howard Avenue fire, but the Howard Avenue fire was another incident where fire spread to 4 buildings because of a vacant building. And so when we look at it, excuse me one second, when we look at what vacant buildings do, the cost to the residents nationally are $785 million a year, and an increase in firefighter fatalities. We're talking about what we normally do in our regular business of looking at buildings. When we go out and do district familiarization, when firefighters look at hydrant locations, how they can get a truck into a street, they take into account the types of buildings that are in their district. This is done on a daily basis. It's something we do already. All we're looking to do in one instance is to make sure that we placard these buildings. These placards are based on the national standards, the National Fire Protection Association. They are reflective signs that would go outside of the building, at least 14 feet if we're available to do so, but at least at the second story level if it's a second story building. In the past, they used to spray paint the buildings and tack signs onto them. That's not something that we want to do. We want to make sure that there is a visible warning. If you see a square box with that red square in it, it says it's normal structure. It's been secured. There are no issues in there. If there is a slash across the box, it tells us to enter with caution, and then it forewarns the firefighters. But also, if there is a box with an X inside of it, we know not to enter at all, unless to save a life. That is life-saving real-time information for us. This also coincides with us documenting this not only in fire prevention, sharing that information with LCI and the building department, but it also goes into our pre-planning. So even en route to an emergency, firefighters will know that this is a building that we put our hands on, that we know what's going on inside that building and what will work and what will not work. When you see a slash inside of the box, there's an abbreviation code that we use that will tell us vital information that can protect us. RO is the roof is open, SM that the stairs are missing, FE to avoid the fire escapes, HF that there's holes in the floors or that the floors are completely open. These are things when firefighters are fighting fires inside of buildings are critical information and indicators that we need to know that not only allow us to operate safely, but allow us to get victims out of those buildings. The other thing is when people talk about the injuries in a vacant building, I wrote an article several years ago. I actually got injured in a fire several years ago, and it was a vacant building. And when I got injured, my wife says, "Why on earth did you get injured in a vacant building? There's nothing in there to save." And I had to explain that, yeah, there are things to save because the building's fire didn't start by itself. There may be people in there. There may be people who are unsheltered. There may be folks who are just trying to stay out of the weather, or there may be folks who are up to no good. They could still be inside that building. And by our very presence, by firefighters going in to put in the fire, it's no longer vacant. We're in there as well. All we're asking is that we put together a program, which we worked with Deputy Corporation Counsel, the CAO's office, to put together a program of documenting these buildings, registering them, and to make sure that folks that own these buildings, they maintain them, they secure them, to prevent us from having to go in under certain circumstances. In addition, it's a very simple process. The person would make an application, they would pay the fee. And the fee is based on the size of the structure, the use of the structure, whether it's residential, whether it's commercial. At that time, a person can or an owner can request an exemption. And that would require a meeting between LCI, building department, and fire department to see if an exemption is warranted. And then the registration is completed. Then there's a visual inspection of the building, making sure that the things that we are looking for, making sure that it's secure, the building systems are in place, but also things that most folks don't think about. That Howard Avenue fire was a vacant building, but they had never turned off the gas. So when the fire started, the gas fed it. So as part of the registration process in the application, it says, are the primary energy systems secured? In other words, are the gas, electric, and water turned off, which may make a fire or conditions worse. So that's also the part of the information that we're going to collect and share. And we'll update the city's database. Part of the rewrite in the ordinance, because the fire ordinance had not been touched since 1996. Part of the ordinance was to make sure that the clear lines of responsibility are there. Under the state law, the building official has certain responsibilities. Under city code and charter, livable cities has a certain responsibility. And also under the fire code, the fire department has responsibilities. When we look at the process of an annual renewal, we will look at whether the building was secured, whether it was registered, whether it changed owners, whether it was maintained. And all of that, based on the code, what we've written into the code is that we will provide back to the Board of Alders a quarterly report stating the number of vacant buildings and the amount of fees collected so that we can see the process of securing these buildings. I'm going to be succinct because it's a long night. I deleted my 30 other slides. I just want to tell you that this ordinance is not only about firefighter safety, it's about neighborhood safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Olston. Would the Deputy Corporation Counsel like to add anything?
I think Chief Olston covered the purpose of the ordinance. My job was to take his brilliant ideas and put them on paper, incorporate them into the existing fire code. The document that you have in front of you identifies them. It clearly shows what the new information is, where the changes are. And this also gave us an opportunity to clean up a few issues with the fire code. As the chief said, it hadn't been touched in quite some time, and every single internal reference was wrong. So we had a chance to clean that up. I think it does what the chief wants, and it's an opportunity for further safety for our firefighters and our neighborhoods. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Before I open to colleagues, I just a quick clarifying question on what you just said. When you say you took the opportunity to clean up the code, you mean things like making sure the internal references match, not like adding new policies in under the umbrella of this new proposal?
Yeah, that would be correct. And not really that they match. There were references to there were links to other sections of the ordinances that were just incorrect. I don't know when this happened, but they were incorrect. So it was not to fix that.
Understood. Thank you.
Just on a point of order, Mr. Chair, I don't recall, and I may have drifted off, if whether Deputy Corporation Counsel has given her name and address for the record.
You are correct as always, Mr. Vice Chair.
I am Catherine Lamar. My business address in New Haven is 165 Church Street. I'm also a New Haven resident. I live on El Abrazo Boulevard.
And you caught me too, John Alston, 952 Grand Avenue. I wrote it at the top of my paper, Alder Furlow, and still missed it.
Thank you both, and thank you, Alder Furlow. I'm usually better at staying on top of that, but it's an intense evening.
I'm your ride or die, Mr. Chair.
We know it. We know it. Do any members of this committee have any questions for the chief or for the Deputy Corporation Counsel on this item? I recognize Alder Morrison, then Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question, thank you, Chief, for your presentation. I always like to see when we go back and look at old policies and how we can make things better for today. And I also like the district familiarization that you guys do, because I actually, in the condominium place where I live, all the beautiful firemen just showed up one day walking around. And I'm like, okay. They're like, no, we just need to know the building. And so to hear you put that in context was really great. My question, though, in doing this process and having the linkage between yourself and the building permits department and LCI, when you guys are out doing these observations and you report back out to LCI, will LCI what is the word that I'm looking for? Would they code these places for blight? Would we be able to reach out to the owners to mandate cleanups, things of that sort? Because to me, one of the reasons, I am not a fire person at all, but to me, one of the reasons why things caught on fire in all these different places that you just pointed out was because there's stuff in them, right? There's something caught on fire. And so that says that, there might not be blight, say, on the outside, but the inside is so damaged. And like you said, someone moved and left the heat on, and then one thing fed into the other. So do you know, or I don't know if this question is for you, Chief, or for Deputy Corp Counsel Lamar, will LCI be able to say blight to a property and force the people to clean it up, or charge them so we can clean it up so we won't continuously have these issues, if any of that makes sense?
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. It does make absolute sense. When I came here 5 years ago, we did not have the systems or the communication network that we have now. We did not share information. LCI, building department and fire department kind of were closer because we reviewed plans together, but we only came together at a fire. We broke those barriers and silos down 3 years ago, actually 4 years ago, where we started to share information. In fact, our vacant building list came from LCI. So I'm in a roundabout way, what I'm telling you, multiple hands will be touching this project. And so if we notice something that is in the wheelhouse of LCI, they will not only be notified, but they'll already have the information in the system. We're using VOC to share the information between our relative departments. The building department, Jim Tercio and I are on the phone all the time. So what happens is when we see an issue, we're looking at it from fire and life safety. Building is looking at it from construction. Livable cities is looking at it from livable cities, blight, commercial property, multiple family. We all have our different views of the same instance. The only difference is now we're sharing that information, but we're working under the same ordinance. And as you read the ordinance, it will actually direct that livable cities, building department, where our wheelhouses are. Ms. Lamar did an excellent job of carving that out and wordsmithing it so that we all know our roles and responsibilities. So in answer to your question, yes. Will we directly do it? No, but we will all share in that process of looking at these properties. Yes.
So just to add to that, when you guys do the fire department is conducting the district familiarization process, would LCI, would the building director or someone from his or her office come out and be a part of that process, or are they solely relying on you guys doing your checks and passing the information on?
I'm glad you asked that question. That happens already for every situation that we go in. If while they were walking around your property or development, they spotted something, they would call a fire marshal in, someone from our inspection. They immediately would call in someone else, either the building department or LCI. There have been plenty of times that building and LCI have called us in, and there are also times that we call them in. Regardless of a vacant building project or registration, we do that automatically now.
Okay,
This is
so
another layer.
So they won't necessarily, like you all won't necessarily go out on the third Tuesday of the month and then the second Monday together. However, when your people go out, or if buildings go out, or if LCI goes out, everyone now is on the same page to say, oh, I need to be in touch with this one or that one to make sure that we're addressing the overall need. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Again, thank you for taking an old ordinance out the bag and cleaning it up to ensure our safety, because as you showed in that one fire news clip, that is real. You know, one house, just because one house is on fire doesn't mean the rest of the block won't burn down as the fire starts to spread. So thank you for, being forward thinking and thinking of things such as that to keep us safe. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you, Alder.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. I recognize Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief Austin, as always, for your leadership and your expertise. My question is, and I looked through, it was quite a long thing to look through all that. So I read it through because I wanted to, not just the red line, but I wanted to get an understanding of how it all works. But what I didn't see, and I could have missed it, I didn't see the fines. So are there any fines, or if a building has to be demolished? I didn't see it there. I know our city does is reimbursed, or what's the word? Alder Marshad, help me. But there is a way that we do get the money back.
Yes.
But if a building is abandoned outside of us, normally, I know LCI puts liens on buildings, but is there another type of fine that is done as Public Works does, and actual tickets that has to be paid?
So the enforcement is in the fees fines and details and abatements. And that is addressed in the code. Ms. Lamar did an excellent job of referring not only to the code, but who is responsible for demolishing a building or condemning a building. All that goes into the state code, statute 118 under the building officials code. So what you were talking about is actually in the budget. There's a scheduled fee in the budget. It is based on size, use, and it is fair. What we did in this research, this is a program I worked on in my old department. There are several other fire departments in the area, in the region. We even compared our department and city to other cities that do it so that we set aside a fair schedule fee. If the fee and registration is not done or the building is not secured, LCI and DPW have the authority to do it and pass on that cost through the process of a lien to the owner and or to the person that is going to buy it as well. Those fees also will go through that mechanical lien process. This is not a way to make money. What it is, when we always say in our business, when it's fines and or penalties, it is to get compliance. So we try information and education first to work together. And if not, then there's the carrot. And then the other mechanism is to utilize some monetary method of getting folks' attention to them for them to comply. But we will not wait for them. We will, if a building is unsecured, we're going to secure it. And we do have the means of identifying ownership. We're a lot better at it now than we've been in the past because of technology.
Thank you for that refresher and answer. That's some information that I should have already known. My noodle doesn't retain as much. Alder Marshall said he hit 50. I might be a little older than that, but I'll never tell.
Well, I hit 61 last month, and I still use these, Alder Marchand. They're all over my screen. So welcome to the club. Keep living.
Well, Chief, you look good. My last question, if I may, Mr. Chair, is have you identified, or is there an approximate number of buildings throughout our city that would fall under this category?
My current list is about 293. I know, I see Deputy CAO Becky Bombero. I guarantee she has the list right in front of her, but I think it's about 270, 290. And it's mixed. It is single family, multiple family, commercial, and residential. And again, we through the ordinance and this code, we will be sharing that information with the Board of Alders on a quarterly basis.
And through you, Mr. Chair, just as my final comment, because I know I would think that some of these buildings may be under contract. There's one in my ward on Blake, the old Community Action Building that's vacant and has been sitting there, and it is a hot mess. And so through you, Mr. Chair, if it is possible, perhaps we can get an approximate number of maybe how many are actually abandoned and others that are vacant and maybe under contract for some type of construction or demolition by a new owner.
So noted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you, Alder Furlow, and age before beauty, because I'm turning 35 next week, so I guess I'm the spring chicken here. So,
enjoy it, sir.
Do any other colleagues on this committee have questions? I see no further questions. I will also remind colleagues that we have a positive City Plan Commission report on this item, which you can find in your packet. That was delivered to us earlier, but staff is telling page 113. So if you're dying to read the positive CPC report, you can look at page 113. So I don't see any other colleagues with questions. So I will now ask if there are any members of the public who wish to be heard on this item, item number 2. Second call. Any members of the public who wish to be heard on item number 2, please raise your virtual hand. Last call. Any members of the public who wish to be heard on the item? Seeing none, we thank city staff once again for the presentation on this item.
Thank you. And if I don't see any of you, please enjoy your holidays and be safe. Be well. Thank you.
Thank you. You as well. Alder Marchand.
Mr. Chair, I move that we close the public portion of this meeting.
Second.
There's been a motion to close the public portion of the meeting, which has been seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will take the roll. Alder Furlow.
Yes.
Alder Farrar Santana.
Yes.
Thank you. Alder Douglas.
Yes.
Alder Morrison.
Yes.
Alder Marchand.
Yes.
We don't have Alder Brackeen, and I am at yes as well. The public portion of this meeting is closed. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Alder Marchand.
I move item 2.
Is there a second?
Second.
Item 2 has been moved and seconded. Discussion on item 2. Alder Marchand.
Mr. Chair, I am grateful for Chief Alston and the city staff for putting this together. It seems like a really good idea, and I encourage colleagues to vote in support of the motion to give a favorable recommendation to the full board. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Marchand. Alder Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too stand in support of this item. It always excites me when the chief comes before us with these great ideas and he explains the fire world so simply. For even I understand a lot of things that he's saying, and I'm thankful for that, because I'm thankful for the constant thought of how to keep us, the residents, keep New Haven safe. And so I too stand in support of this item because it's all about the safety and it's all about moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Further discussion? Seeing none, I will take the roll on item 2. Alder Furlow.
Yes.
Alder Farrar Santana.
Yes.
Thank you. Alder Douglas.
Yes.
Alder Morrison.
Yes.
Alder Marchand.
Yes.
And Decker is yes as well. Item 2 carries favorably. So we have another item that was on our agenda. I will remind colleagues that we have been delivered a clarifying substitute text that I would suggest that we may want to adopt that if the item 1 is moved. So yes, just that reminder. Alder Marchand.
Mr. Chair, I move item 1.
Second.
Item 1 has been moved and seconded. Discussion on item 1. Alder Marchand.
Mr. Chair, I move to amend by substitution.
Second.
There has been a motion to amend by substitution, which has been seconded. Discussion. Alder Marchand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues will recall at the beginning of our proceedings this evening, the city staff presented substitute language to clarify some sections of the ordinance amendment that needed a little tuning up. Also, they made some revisions to the definitions, such as the definition for student housing, for example. And that was the first presentation that staff made this evening before we went to the public hearing. I reviewed the substitute language, which is really just about clarifying things and isn't substantive. And so I recommend we adopt those changes through substitution. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Marchand. Further discussion on the amendment only? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Alder Furlow.
Yes.
Thank you. Alder Farrar Santana.
yes,
Alder Douglas.
Yes.
Alder Morrison.
Yes.
Alder Marchand.
Yes.
And I am yes as well. We are now back to the item as amended. Before proceeding, I myself am going to make a fairly lengthy statement, and in order to facilitate that, I would ask if my vice chair, Alder Furlow, would temporarily take the chair of the meeting. I
Yes.
think, great. So Alder Furlow is now the chair, and I put my hand up.
Alder Decker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think that we've had an extremely productive now 2 months of discussion on this inclusionary zoning item. And I just want to lay out for colleagues my thinking on it. And I want to be really clear about what I think the purpose of inclusionary zoning is and what it isn't. So this inclusionary zoning policy in front of us, as far as I'm concerned, it's a policy that ensures that everyday people aren't locked out when developers are building large market rate buildings. It sets aside a certain number of affordable apartments in these new developments in these neighborhoods that have a lot of new development. So it's about these market rate developments. I think that there are some really important goals that the Board of Alders has for our legislative agenda that inclusionary zoning does not address at all. Inclusionary zoning has no impact on existing buildings. We've heard from many residents over these 2 months that the state of some of the existing affordable housing in the city is, I will say, inadequate. Other people have used sort of more colorful words in some of this testimony. But inclusionary zoning is not going to address that. Inclusionary zoning doesn't directly address displacement either. And I think perhaps most importantly, or as importantly, it does not address particularly deeply affordable. Many folks in the testimony have made that point, that perhaps the greatest need in our city for affordable units is at the deeply affordable level. And that's not something that IZ is going to do, because it's about this certain crop of market rate developments. So one thing that I am going to recommend going forward is I would like for the Board of Alders to formally call upon the Affordable Housing Commission to present to this board recommendations on policies having to do with deeply affordable units and with anti-displacement, because inclusionary zoning is meant to address market rate development. And we know that with market rate development, if we're not careful, can come gentrification and displacement. I think that there are policies out there that can help address this. I don't think that inclusionary zoning by itself does that. So I think we're going to need a set of policies that do that as well. So I would want to work with colleagues to basically make that charge to the Affordable Housing Commission that we set up in the past. So that's thing one. Thing two, there's also been a lot that I've heard in the testimony about the level of affordability in terms of the AMI and it being pegged to 50% of the area median income, as opposed to why is it not the median income of Dixwell or of Fairhaven or of certain neighborhoods. So when I looked at inclusionary zoning policies in other cities, and city staff also lay this out in their presentation, most of these policies nationwide have a much higher AMI level, more like 80%, 70%. 50%, like by those metrics, is quite low. And my understanding is that's like in deference to the fact that we do want this to be targeted so that people in New Haven can afford it, that we're not thinking about folks in Guilford and their median income. I think that the trade-off is bringing that total AMI down to a much lower level so that we can do that. So I'm actually comfortable with that part of the proposal. The other key part of the proposal, or another key part of the proposal, is about the incentives that the city would be offering developers in order to build these units. And the more that I look at them, these incentives are generous. I do believe that they're generous and that they will incentivize market rate developers to keep building in New Haven. And I'm okay with that if we are getting enough units, because we do need more apartments, period, in New Haven. I firmly believe that. We need more deeply affordable, which again, I don't think IZ is the road to that, and I want to figure out the road. We need market rate in many different neighborhoods, and we need the sorts of affordable units as well that are going to be created by IZ, not exclusively. So I think given that AMI level and given those particular incentives that we're offering to developers, I do want to figure out how the levels of affordability in these zones, the core zone and the strong zone, and particularly on city land, go up. Now, city staff has laid out that this is a very sort of technical bill, and that there's a complicated formula about trade-offs. And I believe that, and in deference to that, I do want to take a little more time with city staff to figure out exactly what would be the mechanism for raising the affordability levels. I'm open to it being some sort of runway or phase-in. I'm open to it being needing to, perhaps talk about the vouchers filling in some of that additional affordability. I'm open to a few different mechanisms, but I do think that we need to send a signal loud and clear that those affordability numbers need to go up. The targets that I have in mind, that I have, said before, are I would want to see 30% affordability on public land. I would want to see 20 in the strong zone. I would want to see, in the core zone, I would want to see 10 in the strong zone. And I would also like to make sure that, and this was a recommendation from the Affordable Housing Commission, I would like to make sure that Science Hill, the entirety of Science Hill is included in the strong zone, because the Affordable Housing Commission pointed out that's another thing that I need to go, I think, with city staff block by block to make sure that we've got it. So I know that's a lot of word salad. All that being said, I would suggest that we vote this item favorably tonight, because I think that the core of the proposal is very strong. I think it's good. I think that we need to figure out the technical aspect with city staff about what exactly is the way that we're getting to that higher level of affordability, those percentages that I laid out. I would want to do that before the second reading. I would not want to hold up this bill, which I think is almost there, in order to do that. But I would want to commit to doing that before the second reading. I would want to make sure that Science Park is included. And I would want to make sure that we are formally making the call on the Affordable Housing Commission to deliver to this board policies about anti-displacement and about deeply affordable housing. So that is what I'm advocating colleagues to do. I'm urging you to vote favorably, but I'm also urging you to work with me in the next few weeks to make sure that we get this exact mechanism for higher affordability completed with city staff. And I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? I call on Alder Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to speak on it somewhat follow up as Alder Decker talked about the need to increase the number as far as affordable. I like the fact that he's talking about 10%, 20%, 30%. Those of you who know me, I have been talking about 30% affordable needs to be, that's what it should be, or higher in every way. I know that, you know, we probably can't do that. I love the fact that we're going to look at the 30% off the top as far as building on public land. But I wanted to, you know, make sure that we know that New Haven is, to me, is a gold mine. People want to build in New Haven, and we have to know that. We have to know that we have something to offer in our city. As we all know, I represent the Dixwell community. And my area, you know, as everyone always says, Dixwell is becoming gentrified. And I know that, but at the same time, I have a responsibility as an alder to my community to make sure that development happens, but at the same time, people that live in this community, if we're building apartment buildings, that they can also move in. And so I have a project that's in my area right now. That's in the Ashman Canal area, where I'm working with developer RJ Development. And when they came to me a couple of years ago, they came to me and said that they wanted to build 124 units with 20% affordability. And automatically I said 20% is not enough. And for me, I'm not a mathematician. Alls I know, if you wanted to build 124 units, I want 50 of those units to be affordable. And when I say affordable, I mean the real affordable. And I said that to the developer. He, you know, looked at me like I was crazy. He went away. Maybe about 2 or 3 months later, he figured out a way of how to give me the 50 units. Now, in giving me, in initially asking for the 50 units, that was like over 42%, which I know was a little crazy, but if you don't ask, you won't know. And so when he came back with a plan that spoke to the fact that he can give me the 50 units, build the 50 units, but he had to add additional units onto his number. And so in adding those additional 24 units to his number, gave us a third. And that's fair, because the reality is, if you live in Dixwell and you live in a house or wherever you live and you want to move to an apartment, you should not have to leave Dixwell because you can't afford the apartments. Dixwell has always been a place where people can afford, and to have buildings built that the people that live here can't go in, that's something that I cannot, I can't, usher. I cannot say that that's okay. I look at Winchester Laws. That happened way before I came around. There's probably about 4 units in there affordable. Everybody else is paying $3,500, $5,000 a month. I have a decent job. I'm not affording that. So if I'm not affording that, I look at my whole ward as not being able to afford something like that. But at least I know with this new building coming, there's going to be 50 residents, 50 families that will be able to live in exclusive housing and be able to afford it. And so if this developer was able to figure out a way, which came with the incentives, help with the taxes and things of that sort, but it worked. And so we as a board, as a committee, we have to make sure that we push that with the administration to have these conversations, to look at the fact that we have to increase the affordability. Because when you're talking 10%, 20%, you're giving someone a bone. No one wants that. People want to stay in their communities. And we have to know that we have something to offer here. Because when I told that developer that I wanted 50 units, he could have took that information and walked away. But he did, but he came back because we have something to offer here in New Haven. And so it's very, very important that we increase that number, because if we don't, as the testimony went forward tonight and last month, who are we really helping? 2 people? That's not enough. We have, in my ward, I have 4,200 residents that I'm responsible for. And so to put a building in my area or any area where residents can only look at and never have the ability to live there, I think that is wrong. That is wrong. That's like waving a carrot in front of someone hungry and they can't get it. That's wrong. And so I just wanted to share that we can do it, that we can increase this number to something that's realistic for our residents, for us, because those of us that sit on the board, at some time we might want to move. We might not be able to afford the $5,000, $10,000 a month rent. And so I just wanted to share that story, a real live story about development in the community and working with the developer to making sure that it's at least even and fair. A third, a third, a third. And so that worked out for Dixville. And so I hope in the work that we do in working with Alder Decker, we can shoot for those same type of numbers or even better. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Alder Marshad.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to, of course, thank the city staff for their proposal, thank the public for their testimony, and thank Alder Decker for his hard work on this. He's done a lot of research, and I, for one, am grateful for all of that, for sure. I want to agree with my colleague from the 22nd Ward that, and with my colleague from the 9th Ward, that we should aim to raise the bar a little bit more if we can. I think circumstances are different across the city, right? What we're talking about here is an underlying zoning change that would affect very large sections of the city. But it wouldn't, there are other circumstances that sometimes arise that give the city more ability to do even more, such as when we're selling land to a developer, we can negotiate a lot more. And so, for example, a development that's being discussed in a couple of weeks, where there's a zoning change being requested along Canal Street next to 25 Science Park. Well, there's a DLDA, a land disposition agreement, which gave us a lot more ability to ask for more. So we can't get the same level of affordability necessarily in a project where we don't have land that we're selling to the developer. The circumstances are different. And so what we've had for many months, many years now, is that in cases where developers didn't need us to sell them land, they didn't need financial help from the city, we didn't have the ability to compel them or to bargain with them about affordability. And so they built market rate. And we couldn't say no because they met all the requirements of the zoning ordinance. So when we have land that they want to buy from us to build a project, we have a lot of ability and authority and power to ask for all sorts of things. On the commercial side, we often ask for jobs agreements and on the residential side, we ask for affordability, right? So, but when we don't have that going for us as a city, we've not been able to really insist upon market rate, anything other than affordable housing. But this ordinance amendment would change that. It would change it in a pretty substantial way. And so we should do it. It's not perfect. I think it could be improved. I admire Alder Decker's suggestion. I agree with the suggestion that we should do that in partnership with the city staff. Since they're the ones who are going to implement this, we should do this together. But I think we should aim to be a little bit more ambitious in terms of levels of affordability in the ways that Alder Decker mentioned. I just want to reiterate for the record that the City Plan Commission did vote to give this a favorable recommendation, which is useful. And I want to address some of the concerns we heard from residents. People spoke with authenticity and sincerity about the tremendous need. And Alder Morrison was speaking about that just a moment ago, the tremendous need that we have in our community for affordable housing. People want to live in their neighborhoods, they want to build a life in their community, but they have a really hard time affording a decent place to live. And of course, we need to beef up our inspection regimen and deal with the housing that already exists. But new housing, we need enough, we need plenty of it to be affordable. But I don't see how this ordinance would actually increase exclusion. It may not increase inclusion enough in terms of meeting the incredible need. And there are other things that could help with that. But I actually don't agree with the argument that somehow, that I think a couple of people have made, and I've seen it in writing in a few places, that this ordinance itself is exclusionary and would contribute to gentrification. I don't see that at all. It's actually trying to like soften those forces and curb them. So no, one could say it's not going far enough, but it is not moving the ball in the opposite direction. I just don't understand that argument. I also think that there was a charge that we weren't being transparent, and I don't agree with that. Now, of course, I should say that zoning matters can be complicated, and not everybody has probably read every document down to the final word. And it's, you know, even when you do, it takes a few times through it to really understand what's going on here. But we've had a very public process, 2 public hearings before this committee, all the documents publicly available, a public hearing before the City Plan Commission, multiple articles in the press about this. Everything we're doing on the public record in front of the Zoomiverse. However many people are going to end up watching us on the YouTube channel later on. We are operating according to our rules, which require transparency. And so we should feel good about the process we've had so far. We should move forward in good faith with the city staff to see how we can improve this. And we should vote favorably tonight to send this to the full board. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion from colleagues? Alder Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, at first, I'd like to thank my colleagues, especially the Chair Decker, for the continuously hard work he's done on this item. I believe myself, you know, just after hearing everything that has been said tonight, I think we're moving in the right direction. We've come a long way when it comes to affordable housing. You know, the conversation was bleak in the past, and I think now we really are moving in the right direction. So I'm going to support this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Douglas. Any further discussion? Alder Decker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to just reiterate strongly one thing that my colleague from the 25th Ward said about the transparency of this process. I firmly and strongly believe that city staff throughout this has A, solicited feedback from a wide range of sources, but then B, there have been several public hearings on this, and it's a very complicated issue. Zoning is complicated, housing is complicated. I'm not saying that, like, you know, we have all of the answers is not my point, but I believe that we are making the moves we're making, you know, in concert with what the public has said at these hearings. As somebody who's chaired several of these meetings, I believe that very strongly. So I just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? So I think I will add that I am also in favor of this. And we know, or should know and remember, that this is not the only part. This is a large part to bringing affordable housing, but it's not the only part. It's a very big piece of it. And we're making a very bold step. And so I want to thank also city staff and our chair, and Alder Marshad in City Plan for his expertise in helping to craft a lot of this language. And I'm looking forward to working and hearing and voting favorably on the final result when it hits our floor for a second reading, as this is still a work in progress. And so having said that,
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Morrison, you had something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to go on the record to also thank the city staff, because this is hard. This stuff is crazy. It is hard, it's technical, it's something that if I had to choose to deal with this or deal with something else, I probably would deal with the something else. And city plan has really over the last years has really made an effort to tackle these issues that you don't want to tackle, because you got to go through all of this. No matter what you do, it seems like we want a little more, but I am so thankful to Director Woods and her staff and the whole economic development division for this work and city plan, Alderman Marchand, for all of this, because if you left it up to me, it probably wouldn't be good. That's why you got these nice professionals in place, making sure that we have the things that we need to have. And we always got to remember, with any type of law that we try to make or that we make, it always can be brought back. Chief Austin showed that tonight. In '96, there was a law. He took it, he dusted it off, they updated it, and now in 2001, he's come back to 2021, he's come back to ask for revisions. So we always have that right. So I always want the city to know that, as you said, Mr. Chair, this is not perfect, but we always have the ability to constantly make it better. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Here we have a very astute researcher in our chair, and we have our policy guru and Alderman Marchand. So I'm confident that with all of us together, we'll be able to bring something that's going to fit our community, our city, and ease the burden on many. So with that, I'm going to return it back to our chair so that he can take the vote on this item as amended. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. If there's no further discussion from colleagues, then I will call the roll. Alder Furlow?
Yes.
Alder Furlow is yes. Alder Farrar Santana?
Yes.
Alder Douglas?
Yes.
Alder Morrison?
Yes.
Alder Marchand?
Yes.
Decker is yes as well. The item carries, although our work is not done. Alder Marchand?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none. Alder Furlow?
Yes.
Alder Farrar Santana?
Yes.
Alder Douglas?
Yes.
Alder Morrison?
Yes.
Alder Marchand?
Yes.
I am yes as well. And we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for
Good night, all.
great process.
Thank you.